Hello everyone, today I will be covering one of the most unique storylines from the show Star Wars The Clone Wars, and that is the Mortis storyline. Season 3, Episode 15 through Season 3, Episode 17. So I'll be covering those 3 episodes in this video, and while they aren't like 100% perfect, to me they are perfect Clone Wars episodes because they excel at what Clone Wars aims to be, especially in these episodes. Clone Wars Season 3, Episode 15, Overlords, is a really awesome episode because it kicks off this storyline with an extremely interesting premise, which is pretty unique up to this point in the show. And that premise is that Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin end up in a strange, weird world that is completely foreign to them and has a lot of mystery behind it. The cool thing about the setup to this part of the plot is that it doesn't waste any time with the setup and it gets right to it. The main characters are on Mortis by like minute 3. The world of Mortis is extremely interesting. The seasons change every few hours. The light side takes up the daytime and the dark side takes up the nighttime. There are no animals and the force is really strong. It's a really cool world. It is extremely rich in force mythology and Star Wars. It's like a hyperbole, like a visualization of the force, and that is really cool. It's really interesting. Something that this episode does a lot of is foreshadow. This entire storyline is a lot about foreshadowing the future, and this episode does it extremely well, and it's extremely interesting. It's not like really boring foreshadowing. It's done super well, and it's riveting, and the script is great, so I don't care that there's an excess of foreshadowing. For example, I like how the main characters are like, it's best if we stick together, and then like a minute later they're immediately split up with Anakin on one side of Fallen Rocks and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka on the other side of Fallen Rocks. This is really cool because like usually Anakin and Ahsoka are paired up in episodes, but here it is something a little different where Anakin is on his own and instead Ahsoka is paired up with Obi-Wan. That is pretty cool and interesting. You don't really think about those two characters being paired together in an episode, so it's really cool that it does this. I like how the dialogue in this episode foreshadows Anakin's fall and Order 66 just a little bit. The later episodes in the storyline do it a little bit more, but it's still really cool that some is done here. The use of a drone camera in some of the scenes is really cool, and it's awesome because like it adds a little bit of a horror or creepy element to parts of the episode that elevate the episode quite a bit. At this point of the story, it is nighttime, and each of the 3 main characters start to have visions. The first vision is Obi-Wan having visions about Qui-Gon Jinn. This is extremely interesting. I love that there's a Qui-Gon Jinn cameo. That's really, really cool. And all of his lines and dialogues are super interesting. The thing I like about this part of the episode is that Qui-Gon Jinn is used really well to help explain Mortis a little bit. I love how there's a bit of a horror element to Anakin's vision about his mother. I really like how that vision turns south and turns into a little scary thing. And the lines of dialogue is really cool. And I also love that in this part of the episode, Anakin has to come to terms with the fact that he killed the Tusken Raiders in Attack of the Clones. That is really cool. Ahsoka's dream with a future version of her is also really cool. One thing in particular that was really notable about this scene was one of the lines by older Ahsoka. The line, "Be warned, you may never see your future if you remain his student." That is really cool, and it also foreshadows a little bit of what Ahsoka's path is in this show. And I thought it was really cool that Dave Filoni had season 5 planned out a little bit, even at like season 3, because with that line, it's hinting towards Ahsoka should leave being Anakin's Padawan, and at the end of season 5, that is exactly what she does. The revelation that Mortis is actually a prison to hold the Force wielder's children is really cool, and it helps the episode establish that it is basically an exaggeration of the conflict in Anakin Skywalker and the Skywalker family and the whole bringing balance to the Force thing. That is really cool. This next scene is awesome because it shows Anakin as the chosen one, as he has to choose between saving Ahsoka or Obi-Wan, but he ends up finding a way to save both of them. That was a really cool trial for Anakin that adds to his character. There is an interesting dilemma set up at the very end of the episode because the older Force wielder is dying and needs Anakin to take his place, and that was what the trial was for. This is a really cool idea, and it would have been awesome too if it was just left at that and this was a one-off episode, but of course there was 2 more episodes about it, and I will talk about those next. But before I do, I just want to give my quick general thoughts on Overlords. The cinematography is awesome. For once in the show, the script is absolutely awesome, with like no lines that I have a problem with. So earlier I rated this episode a 9 when I first watched it, but after rewatching it and seeing all the other 10 out of 10 episodes later in the show, I had to re-rate this episode a 10 out of 10. There really isn't anything wrong with it. There's no like issues I have, aside from maybe 1 or 2 nitpicks, but they're like really, really small. The next episode, season 3, episode 16, Altar of Mortis. I used to not really like love this episode. Like I thought it was great. I thought it was like an 8 out of 10, but I should raise it up to like a 9 out of 10 now, because upon rewatch, I felt like it was better because I had better episodes to compare it to. And my initial problems with it was that it was the middle episode of an arc, so it kind of felt kind of fillery. And I still kind of feel like that, just a little bit. It could have been shortened a little bit, maybe into 2 episodes instead of 3. However, I don't feel that much that way anymore. And secondly, some lines of dialogue just do not work for me, even on rewatch. So the highest I can give it is a 9. However, it is still a very, very awesome episode and one of the best in the entire show. The episode starts off with Anakin having a vision about himself. This is really interesting and a cool idea. And it gets even crazier when, of course, that vision is revealed to be the dark side son. And when that happens, it's a really cool setup for the rest of the 2 episodes and the conflict with the dark side son being the main villain. The dark side brother is a really cool and unique villain because, like, the villains in the Star Wars universe, they're usually like always like against the light side. However, in this episode with this villain wants to destroy both the Jedi and the Sith. He's one of my favorite villains in Star Wars. However, he doesn't quite reach Darth Maul. I don't feel like his performance was as awesome as Darth Maul, and some of Darth Maul's motivations are more clear and much better. The characters are split up yet again. However, even though this may seem like it is copying the structure of the last episode, I don't care about that at all.
because the characters splitting up leads to an extremely interesting conflict for this episode. In this episode, the dark side brother takes Ahsoka away from Obi-Wan and Anakin. Okay, I'm sorry for the movie/TV show in the background. It's impossible to find a quiet time to shoot a video. Anyways, so the next scene is where Obi-Wan and Anakin are arguing over Ahsoka. Anakin is letting his attachments get the better of him, and he will not leave without getting back Ahsoka, while Obi-Wan is more cautious and is trying to not start trouble, so they both fight over it. And in the end, Anakin storms off on his own to the dark side palace, while Obi-Wan tries to get help from the father. Turning Ahsoka evil is an extremely interesting premise for the episode, and it makes this episode extremely unique, and it has a really cool conflict because of it. There's an extremely interesting dilemma with the force-wielding family because the dark side son is dabbling way too much into the dark side, and that causes an imbalance in the force. After the argument that the family has, it's really cool how the dark side son gets so riled up that he attacks his father, and this moment was genuinely shocking. Up to this point, the show didn't have many shocking moments, but this was definitely one of the shocking moments that it had in the first 3 seasons. There is a really cool blade that is used to kill the dark side son. I don't view this much as a problem of there being like a MacGuffin or whatnot in the story, because this MacGuffin is used really well, and it is an interesting part of Star Wars lore that I was glad to see. The conversation between Anakin and Ahsoka is crazy and intense. It is so twisted and dark, and I love this conversation. It is an awesome direction for the show. The fight scene that follows isn't the most well choreographed fight ever, but it is one of the fight scenes in Star Wars that has the most meaning. And it gets even crazier when it turns into 2 fronts, with the Jedi on the ground and then the Force family fighting in the Citadel or whatnot, or tower, or whatever that is. So it's really cool how this fight turns into something way more than just good versus evil fight and has a lot of meaning to it. I love how the villain nearly achieves his goal by getting the blade into his hands, but then immediately goes south because instead of killing his father, he accidentally kills his sister, and that makes him go crazy, and it makes the episode crazy and awesome. And I love how it's like a visual representation of the Force becoming unbalanced with too much dark side. This episode sets up an extremely interesting conflict where the heroes must get back to their ship and escape before the villain does. That is really cool. Overall, I feel like this episode has awesome voice acting, especially in this episode. The voice acting is insane, especially with Ahsoka's voice actress. The character work is awesome, and the pacing isn't 100% amazing. It could have been shortened quite a bit and shortened into 2 episodes instead of 3, but it was still a really great, awesome episode that we got.
Clone Wars Season 3, Episode 17, Ghosts of Mortis, is not the best episode in this storyline. However, it is probably the most memorable because it has some of the craziest scenes in the entire show. The episode opens up with the group separating once again as Obi-Wan and Ahsoka stay at the ship, while Anakin is convinced that he needs to help Mortis one more time. My only nitpick with this episode is that it likes to find ways to draw itself out and be longer. However, I don't view it that much of a problem because this episode is not boring and it doesn't feel too slow. The episode does this by having a plot about trying to repair the ship that they need to leave. The second Qui-Gon Jinn cameo is really cool. This time Qui-Gon Jinn is talking to Anakin, and this conversation kind of proves that the Qui-Gon Jinn cameo is a bit more than just an apparition from Mortis. It might actually be the Force ghost of him, so that is pretty cool. While the first episode explores Mortis as a whole, and the second episode explores the family, this episode delves deep into the dark side of Mortis and goes into that realm.
What if I could show you the future?
The scene where the dark side brother shows Anakin his future as Darth Vader is insane, crazy, so many words to describe it, and of course, it is iconic. It is one of the most iconic moments in the show. It is absolutely crazy seeing all the moments from Revenge of the Sith and a little bit of A New Hope recreated in animated form, and it really fits this episode well. I heard some people say that they didn't like that the episode did this, that it relies too much on telling the future and giving exposition instead of telling its own plot. However, I disagree, because up to this point, the show has had nearly 3 seasons to establish itself. So it's about time that it talked about the ending of the show a little bit and teased that a little bit. So it's about time for that, so I don't have a problem, because this storyline was put in exactly the right place it needed to be. Oh yeah, the origin of the no! That's in this episode. It's weird, and it's done better here than in Revenge of the Sith, but it's still pretty cool. I love how the dark side brother uses these visions that he gave to Anakin as a way to convince him to join the dark side. So in this episode, Anakin joins the dark side brother and is convinced that this is the only way that he will stop being Darth Vader in the future. However, this is a flawed mindset. This is because there's a line that Anakin says where he says, "I have seen that it is the Jedi who will stand in the way of peace." This dynamic between Anakin and the dark side brother oddly parallels the dynamic between Ahsoka and Darth Maul later in the show in a way. The villain both convinces the hero to join them. However, I guess the difference is Anakin does not decline after learning his true plan, while Ahsoka declines after learning Darth Maul's plan. I think this is really cool because it shows that Ahsoka learns from Anakin's mistake in this episode and doesn't make the same mistake later in the show. That's pretty cool. Although I feel like when a character's memory is erased when the story needs them to, just so that it can continue moving, I usually even though I think that is generally lazy, in this context, it's used pretty well, so I'm not too bothered by it. The reason why I'm not too bothered by it is because the episodes up to this point have been a really awesome Elseworlds story, so I am fine with the writers taking this route to end the Elseworlds story in a way. The fight between the Jedi and the dark side's son is really crazy. It is even crazier when considering the context and the 3-dimensional context that the galaxy and universe is at stake in this fight, because if the dark side's son leaves, then there will be an imbalance in the Force pretty much forever. Now here's the plot twisty part of the episode that is really awesome. So in this episode, the father, in a shocking moment, decides to stab himself so that he can lower the power level of his son, so that the fate of the universe is not in his hands. So I thought that was really cool, and it was also very shocking. This storyline has done a fantastic job at being super shocking, and it's the start of a bunch of really shocking episodes later in the show, pretty much. Another crazy thing about this scene is seeing the Darkseid son get emotional after his father dies, even though, like, earlier in the episodes, the Darkseid son was like, "I'm gonna kill you, father." But like once it actually happens, he realized what he has done pretty much, and he gets emotional over this. This really adds on to his character, and I thought that was really cool. It is really cool how there's yet another plot twist where not only was the father being sort of genuine, he was also trying to distract the Darkseid son so that Anakin can kill him. That was really cool. Yet another plot twist and another shocking moment. And then to give some weight to the storyline, after Anakin's memory was wiped, the father does warn Anakin a little bit about his future without directly telling it, so I thought that was cool. Lastly, it is really interesting how Mortis starts to fall apart once all the Force builders have died. So overall, I thought this storyline was pretty awesome. There are a few weaknesses to it, so it's not like perfect TV episodes, but I still feel like it's the perfect Clone Wars storyline. And I guess to go more in depth to what I mean about perfect Clone Wars storyline, so it can have some issues, and I'm still gonna call it like a perfect Clone Wars storyline because based on the rest of the episodes, which are on average like 5s, 6s, or 7s, this storyline is a masterpiece. And basically, this storyline, it does everything that Clone Wars aims to do and excels at it, and that's what I think a perfect Clone Wars episode should be. As long as it takes what the Clone Wars series is trying to do and excels at it, then I feel like I could give that perfect Clone Wars episode moniker, as long as there's not too many problems. So like 9 out of 10s, that's like perfect Clone Wars episode. But like the 10 out of 10s, I award 10 out of 10s to not only like episodes with no problems, but also episodes that take what Clone Wars wants to be and transcends it and becomes something else. This can either be through themes in the dialogue, or it could be through more third-dimensional and interesting fights like Sith versus Sith or Jedi versus Jedi, or like just more than Jedi versus Sith. So that's my thoughts on this storyline. I don't know if I'm gonna pair the other storylines like this. I might do individual episodes again. I'm not too sure yet. Anyways, please like and subscribe and share this video. What's your thoughts on this storyline? Is this one of your favorites, one of your least favorites? Please comment down below. Alright, bye.